In data analytics, a lot of the discussion focuses on the audit tests, analyses, and reporting of results. How can we leverage data analytics to be more efficient and effective in our jobs, whether it's within audit or any other area that deals with data? But what doesn't often get recognized is the behind the scenes effort that is essential to execute effective analytics. What I'm talking about here is data preparation. In many, if not most cases, some level of data preparation is required before we can begin using data analytics. Data preparation is required if we want to have data quality that is high, not low. The quality of the data is key to the level of quality in the decisions made throughout the organization. The results from our decisions are not only influenced by the quality of information, but also how we interpret that information. For example, at a personal level, we rely on accurate information when making a significant purchase, such as a home, car, or even a smartphone, for example. A company relies on accurate and relevant information when deciding whether to expand its business or make a significant purchase. Government agencies rely on information when creating budgets or determining how money is spent and collected. And banks and financial institutions rely on accurate information when making important investment decisions. So the common denominator here is data. Data drives decision making in all areas of business. Being able to collect, curate, analyze, and interpret data can be a significant challenge. A weak link in any of these areas can have a cascading effect on the quality and reliability of data and the decisions that it drives. In this short webcast, we're going to focus on three areas related to data preparation: data acquisition, data cleansing techniques, and testing data validity, completeness, and accuracy. So let's get started. Number one, data acquisition, getting the data in a format that is easy to work with. An easy format is something that looks like this, where the data is organized in rows and columns, each transaction representing a record. For auditors and many professionals that work with this level of detailed information, this format is ideal. However, what we end up getting more often than not is data that looks like this, or like this, or even this. Unfortunately, this is where some people will say, thank you, but no thank you. Close the application and either resort to copying and pasting lines of data to Excel or not working with the report at all. In fact, a New York Times article published in 2014 says, data scientists spend between 50 to 80% of their time mired in this more mundane labor of collecting and preparing unruly digital data before it can be explored for useful nuggets. They even go as far as calling this process data janitor work. And for many, they opine that not much can be done about it. It's part of the job. And in some cases, it feels like everything we do. Let's look at an example of a report and see what we can do. In IDEA, I click on the desktop button to open the import assistant. I select the type of client file to import, which in this case is a PDF file. A report reader module will get launched that will display the contents of the aging report. And what I do here is highlight an example of the first transaction line in the report. In the dialog box, I select standard layer and the line gets placed front and center at the top of the document between the two yellow lines. What I'm going to do next is identify something in the transaction line that all the transaction lines have in common. The decimal in the amount field seems to be unique in that position of the report. I enter a period in the field editor and this will trap or capture all the lines that contain a period in that position. So far it looks good. Now I'm going to highlight each data element I wish to import as a field in IDEA. In this example, I highlight the document number. In the field detail section, I provide a name for the field. I also specify the field type. I continue this for each data element I want to import as a separate field. Once done, I save my layer. I perform a validation test to make sure I captured everything correctly. I can also preview the work before import. Everything looks good so far. The information has been translated to a flat table from a report. Next, what I do is capture the second layer of information. Now, this information is not on the same row as the detailed transactions, but it provides context for those records. I highlight this information and create a new layer from it. I repeat the same procedures. I identify a unique characteristic in this layer that all other customer sections have in common. In this case, it will be the colon symbol. I then highlight each data element that I want to import as a field in IDEA. I give the field a name and designate what type it is. I repeat this until I've captured all the data elements I wish to import as fields in IDEA. Once I'm done, I save my work and test for any completeness errors. Here it's letting me know that my highlight wasn't long enough. I make the correct adjustment and continue. I preview the data again and confirm that all the transactions and supporting customer information is now arranged as a flat table. If I want to, I can change the default field order. I can simply go to field order and modify the arrangement. This will allow me to import the data in the order that makes sense for me. I can preview the data one more time to make sure the incoming database looks the way I want it to. I then proceed to click on the import button. I will save my work as a template to be used on future AR aging reports like this before finally importing the print report as a flat database in IDEA. If I scroll from left to right, you can see that the data has been perfectly translated from a print format to a flat table. Even if data were presented in a flat table of columns and rows, it's still possible that I may want or need to parse data within a field in order to work with it. For example, the sales order number field begins with a 2-character prefix, and I want to remove it. In IDEA, this is solved by employing @functions. And we create a new field which will contain the fix for the data in the field. And in the equation editor, as you see here, we use the following @function and syntax to express it. And the result is a newly generated field containing the sales order number without the prefix. I can also use @functions to extract the first and last names in a column where the information is all in one column. In this example, I'll work on the payroll activity database, which has the employee's first and last name in one column separated by a comma. Like the last example, I create a new field for the first name information only. I'll use the split function to define the delimiter that separates the first and last names. In this case, it's a comma. The result is a new field containing only the first name of each employee. I'll do the same procedure for the last name. This time the formula is modified just a little to account for the information to the right of the comma, which is the last name. The resulting field gives me the last name of each employee. What if there is a column that contains both letters, spaces, special characters, as well as numbers, and you want to extract just the numbers so that it looks like this? This type of data cleansing may require multiple add functions working together to achieve the objective. And an idea, I'll open the accounts payable register and create a new field to fix the purchase order field. So I create a new field, and in the equation editor, I'll type the following formula using the just numbers and string functions. When I apply the formula to the new field, it produces only the number portion of the PO field. Another scenario can involve a column with date information that is not a true date field, just the actual date spelled out and treated as a character. To fix this, a conversion is required to format the field into a true date field that will look like the following. I'll open the business claims database and take a look at the pay date field. This field contains date information, but it is not an actual date field, only a character field. This means that in its current form, I can't perform any type of analytics such as aging, stratification, extraction, or calculations on this field because it is not an actual date type. So I'm going to create a new date field. And in the equation editor, I'm going to build a formula that will do a few things. It will deconstruct the dates in the pay date field into its year, month, and day components, and then reconstruct those elements so that it can be properly converted to a date type. And the result is a proper date field that can now be aged and used in date-related analytics. There is one more example I want to demo for you, and that is the situation where data has shifted in a table. In other words, you may have a column that is supposed to have the customer number, but the customer number also has customer names in it. And the customer name field has address information that belongs in its own column. And if we look at this example, you will see that part of the city data is in the COL column, and that's a mistake. And because of that error, it's having a domino effect on the rest of the columns. The country column is including address information, and the address column is including phone numbers. There are even columns like the vendor number that contain phone number and vendor name information. And these inconsistencies can be fixed by getting creative with IDEA functions. I'm going to open the vendor master database, and you can see that the information in the fields have shifted. I will first create a fix for the city field. I'll create a field and use a logical condition that evaluates the field COL to look for any, in this case, question marks at the start of the field. And if it's true, it's going to return what's in the city plus COL column. If it's not true, it will return what's in the city column instead. And the result gives me the field containing just the city information. I'll do one more for the phone field. Because there is phone numbers in the address, phone, and vendor number fields, I'll use a special if function that will evaluate multiple conditions. Basically, if each of these three columns has data that begins with a plus sign, then we include the information in that field, and we apply this pattern rule to the other two columns. This will ensure that we capture all of the phone number information in one field, as can be seen in the resulting new field. So far, you guys have seen examples of data acquisition and data cleansing. Let's talk about how you can use a tool like IDEA to identify issues within your data. And these issues can stem from data not being complete in how it's inputted into the client system, or it may not be valid or accurate information in the first place. But before we get into the demonstration part, let's define what valid, complete, and accurate data is. When I talk about valid data, I'm talking about, does the data follow certain rules? For example, looking at the following invoice number here, the format of a proper invoice number in this particular organization begins with the project number, then the customer number, and finally the sequence number. So if this is a valid invoice number, we can test to see if there are any invoice numbers that contain a character length other than 4 characters, or we can look to see if there are any letters or symbols in the customer number section or the sequence section. So essentially, if there are certain rules that govern a field, you can test for validity. Looking at completeness, it looks at whether all the information in a record or a field is included. Taking the invoice number as an example of incompleteness is if an invoice number is missing in a record. We see this all the time in address data. The address information may not be entered completely for each record. It may be missing street, state, or zip code information. And even if the information is present, it may not be entered consistently. So, lack of completeness affects consistency, which, if left unchecked, can create a true data mess. And finally, accuracy relates to whether the data is exact and true. A field such as total, which is a product of quantity sold times sales price, may be inaccurate if we test the fields and come up with a different outcome. The amounts may be valid and complete, but the calculation inherent per the client is not accurate. Let's go an idea, and I'll show you how you can use the fuzzy duplicate task to identify incomplete or inconsistent data in your population. I'll use the vendor payments database as an example, and I want to see if I have any addresses that are not being entered consistently. The fuzzy duplicate task can be used to look for not exact items, but similar items. It's a great feature to look for real duplicates that might never get caught because they are not 100% identical. Here we identify the field we want to analyze. We then set up the percentage of how similar we want the test to run. I'm going to select 70% and see what I get. The results will display the vendor addresses that are similar based on our 70% similarity. You can see that it identified vendors with inconsistent addresses. Sometimes you may be working with a data set that does not have all the fields needed to perform key tests and analyses. For example, I have a payroll activity database that contains payments made to employees. The employee master database contains information that is not in the activity database, such as the social security number and date of birth, but I wish to have it. I may want the employee's address data included, but it's found in a third database. So we have all these data fields scattered over 3 databases. How do we get the data into one database? We can't just copy and paste fields. No, what we do is perform a one-to-many database join using the visual connector task. So in IDEA, we have the payroll activity database open. We select the visual connector and it will display the payroll activity on the canvas. We then select the databases we need to join to it. We select the employee master and employee address. We connect the databases simply by connecting the key fields found between the three databases. In this case, it's the employee number. Once we make the connections, we then pick the fields that we want to include in our final join. We'll keep all the fields from our payroll activity database and include the social security number, bank account, and department number from the payroll master. And we're going to keep the address information from the address database. The resulting new database now contains all the payroll activity information along with the employee data and address information from the other two databases. Now my database is complete for my purposes. Using the analytic intelligence technology in IDEA, we can analyze a database and display through a dashboard any potential validity and completeness issues within the data. It can identify missing items within a field, zero items, duplicates, as well as point out any possible outliers within the data. If I go ahead and open the employee master database and perform the discover task on it, it will import the database and perform a series of analytics on the data, looking at the amount, date, and category fields. If it finds anything of significance, it will display it through a dashboard. Here I can see that I have two records with duplicate social security numbers, two records with blank social security numbers, as well as blanks in the gender category fields. I can drill down and see in detail the records with incomplete data. Let's look at data validity. I talked earlier about how we can test the rules that govern a field to see if there are any invalid data within the population. In this example, I want to focus on the vendor number field. This field has certain rules around it. A vendor number is valid if the length of the field is exactly 4 characters long. Number 2, vendor numbers cannot be blank. 3, vendor numbers cannot be all letters. And 4, vendor numbers cannot be all numbers. In IDEA, we can use the functions to build a search for records in our population that don't conform to these vendor number rules. I enter my formula in the equation editor and tell it to look for records where the length of the vendor number is something other than 4 characters. IDEA will then filter through the population and give me those records with vendor numbers that are not valid per this rule. I can then look for any vendor numbers that are blank. I will then determine if there are any vendor numbers that are just letters. And I can flip the logic and hunt for any invalid vendor numbers that are just numbers. Lastly, I want to cover how IDEA can be used to test for data accuracy. I'll open the sales order history database and I see that the total field is a product of quantity sold times sales price. I can identify any records where this calculation may not be accurate. So I'll enter the logic. In this case, I'm telling IDEA to show me records where quantity sold times sales price does not equal the total field. IDEA will filter those records that meet that criteria, showing us amounts in the total column that are inaccurate. So as you can see, based on what I've been able to show you, there are countless opportunities to employ data analytic tools and techniques to address messy data. Every organization has some level of mess in their data. Preparing that data is crucial for effective decision making that relies on it. But it's easier said than done, given the research that has found that most people that work within data spend an incredible amount of time prepping it. And the fact that many of the processes is manual still is just insane. And as you have seen, the tools are there to help you leverage this effort, saving hours, if not days, of work. It can help identify the problems and it can also clean and normalize the data so that you can perform your work on it. Here at Automation, we specialize in helping clients with data acquisition and cleansing. If you need extra help in this area or you encounter a data set that's particularly challenging, we encourage you to reach out to us. You can shoot us an email at services@automation.com to discuss any of your needs. Also, just to add, starting in the first quarter of 2019, we're going to be offering a 1 day online course called Data Wrangling with Idea. So now you'll have an opportunity to learn some of these techniques and step up your knowledge of idea and data analytics. Thank you.